Welcome back. All right, so today I'm going to talk about Dallas. I will say this: I have an ugly jersey for any team I cheer for, so this works. Um, Good old-fashioned mooterous, just drink it in. And Dallas is off to kind of a rough start, and I don't know why I didn't see it coming. I thought they'd have some sort of a bounce back. Maybe they still will. It's not as hopeless as some of the other things going on in the NHL. They're not one of the more hopeless teams, but it's going to get tougher the longer it takes for them to turn this around. So they're 6-7-2 to start the season. To me, the most egregious problems they've had, they lost both games against Ottawa that should have been victories. They'd be 8-5-2 if they'd won those. And those 6-3 loss at Vancouver hurts. Ottawa's got a 4-10-1 record. Vancouver 5-10-2. Neither of them have lost against Dallas. This is a problem. So for Dallas, their upcoming schedule, they're at home against St. Louis tomorrow, Saturday. Then they're at home against Edmonton on Tuesday. And then they're at home against Colorado next Friday. So none of those are gimmies. Then they go to Arizona for a Saturday game on the 27th. And then they're at home on the 30th against Carolina. So they've got some games at home. But outside of the Arizona game on the road, none of those home games are gimmies. And for a team that's struggling to score and struggling to keep the puck out of their net, which is an issue because Dallas has always been a team that has done a pretty good job of keeping the puck out of their net, except when they had Lettinen and Niemi as their goaltending tandem. This is problematic. So currently their goals for 2.53 per game, which is 26th. Not a huge surprise they're struggling to score goals. We'll get into that. Goals against per game, 25th at 3.27. That is a bit of a surprise. That's the worst they've been since 2016-2017 defensively. Their power play, third in the NHL at 26.8%. I'm kind of surprised it's that high. And yet, yeah, they generally have been getting a power play goal every game for their last 5. And then all of a sudden that game last night took place and ended that by 1 second. So cruel. And then the penalty kill, 75.5%, 27th overall. That is not a Dallas-like number either. So what we've got here is they're scoring this year, scoring on this side. If it's blank, it's because they weren't members of Dallas last year. Thus, the comparison's not the same when a player goes from one team to the other. It's like Dickinson's scoring has dropped in Vancouver. It might not have if Dallas kept him. So Heiskanen's got 3 goals, 10 assists, 13 points in 15 games. He was very frustrated during last night's game. And it came out emotionally on the ice. That's a first. There are numerous people saying, never saw Heiskanen react like that. Doesn't like losing, which is good. But they got to turn the losing around, right? Last year in 55 games, he had 8 goals, 19 assists, 27 points. Heiskanen's a very good player. But if he's your leading scorer, you're probably not scoring enough. Pavelski, 15 games, 4 goals, 5 assists, 9 points. Last year in 56 games, 25 goals, 26 assists, 51 points. He started off red hot last year. It cooled down for him. And this year, he looks like a 20-goal scorer. So that's good. That's fine. At this stage of his career, that's fine. But last year, he was scoring at a 30-goal pace. We haven't had anybody picking up the slack there. Tyler Seguin, 15 games, 5 goals, 4 assists, 9 points. Last year, he only played 3 games. He had 2 goals in those 3 games. But again, with Seguin, with the amount of money he's making, the fact he's supposed to be in his prime, those are disappointing totals. Jason Robertson's only played 9 games this year. 3 goals, 6 assists for him for 9 points. Last year in 51 games, 17 goals, 28 assists, 45 points. Famously finished as second in the Calder voting. I still think that was the right call. And what we've seen so far, Robertson's been very good. Kaprizov's been very good. I think both teams are happy with those players. Ryan Suter, new addition, 15 games, 2 goals, 6 assists, 8 points. I think he's been fine. I do. I do think that they missed Alexiak on the back end, though. I think that what he was able to do physically, combined with some of the offense he was showing last year, too, for Dallas, I think they missed that. Then you have Jamie Benn, 15 games, 4 goals, 3 assists, 7 points. Again, he's aging. You're going to see this fall back in the totals that he's going to put up. So Ben's not scoring like he used to. Last season, 52 games, 11 goals, 24 assists, 35 points. He is producing at a rate where he should eclipse those totals. However, there's 30 extra games in which to do so. So his points per game is still not where you'd necessarily want it to be. And again, it's comparatively speaking with his cap hit. His cap hit's still really high. Luke Glendening has been fine. 15 games, 4 goals, 3 assists, 7 points. Honestly, the offense from Glendening, while it's the same as Ben's, it's been unexpectedly high from Glendening. He's fit in very well. Radulov, 15 games. He's already played more than he did last year as well. 1 goal, though, 6 assists, 7 points, and he's getting frustrated. Last year, he only played 11 games, but he had 4 goals, 8 assists, 12 points. And when Radulov was in the lineup last year, he was very good. This year, it's just not working. Nothing's clicking for Dallas. Rope Hintz, 15 games this year, 3 goals, 3 assists, 16 points. Last year, he didn't play a game without pain. 41 games, though, 15 goals, 28 assists, 43 points. He was the leader of this team emotionally. He had so much energy when he was in the lineup, and this year, it's all kind of just not been there. And so, again, he looks like a 20-goal scorer, which would be fine, but this is a team that needs 30-goal scorers, and they just don't have that at this point. It's possible Sagan ends up putting up 30, but it's an outside shot right now. Radek Faksa, 15 games, 2 goals, 2 assists, 6 points, or 2 goals, 4 assists for 6 points. Last year, 55 games, 6 goals, 8 assists, 14 points. I've said before, Faksa's not going to wow you offensively, so if they're counting on him for goals and assists, that's a problem. Michael Raffl, new addition, 15 games, 2 goals, 2 assists, 4 points. He's been fine. Again, fourth liner, knows his role, plays it. But again, he's not the one that's going to turn this around for them. Gurianov has been troubling. 14 games, 2 goals, 2 assists, 4 points. I remember a couple of years ago I was in hot water with Dallas fans for saying I didn't get the hype with Gurianov, and I didn't. I thought he was good that year. He had the 20-goal season. I didn't see a huge upside with him, though, beyond that. And last year, 55 games, 12 goals, 18 assists, 30 points. His drop-off this year has been substantial. Last year's totals were considered kind of disappointing, and this year it's gotten substantially worse. So that's one of the red flags right there. John Klingberg is a major red flag with just 3 assists in 11 games. Last year, in 53 games, 7 goals, 29 assists, 36 points. The good news is, for people who think Klingberg is overrated and he doesn't deserve much of a raise over what he gets now, when he's a UFA next summer, with 3 assists in 11 games, he likely won't get it. Unless Vancouver gives it to him. Anyways, Klingberg, 3 assists in 11 games. It's been a disappointing start to the season for him. Lindell, 3 assists in 15 games. Last year in 56 games, he had 5 goals, 11 assists, 16 points. So he's on a slower scoring pace than last year. But again, Lindell's not an offensive defenseman. You can't be counting on him. Jacob Peterson, 9 games, 2 goals, 1 assist, 3 points. We'll see if he gets more ice time. He seems to have that offensive upside. We'll see. The real question is who's going to score the goals for this team. Is Hintz going to turn around? Is Pavelski going to go on a run? Is Sagan going to start to go on a run here? Because they need that. Now in net, there's the alarming downturn of Anton Khudobin. I was fine with Khudobin leaving Dallas last year. I thought, if it ends up being Bishop and Ottinger, I'm fine with that. I understand, though, too, there are fans who still love what Khudobin did in the 2020 playoffs, and they went all the way to the Stanley Cup final. But that was a run Khudobin had never made before that, and he's not going to do it again. This year, he's 3-3-1. He has an .873 save percentage. Last night's game submarined that big time. But even going into last night's game, he didn't have a great save percentage. Last year, he was 12-11-7. .905 was his save percentage. So he was below league average in his save percentage last year. I didn't think Khudobin had a particularly strong season. And so when Holtby came in, I kind of understood. But when it was Khudobin and Holtby, I thought... Anyways, Holtby's 2-4-1, so his record's worse, but his save percentage .918. He's been one of the 3 stars often for Dallas. He's just not getting goal support. So odds are Braden Holtby's watching this and going, okay, now I'm playing well and the team's not playing well in front of me. Last year, I wasn't playing great. The team wasn't playing great in front of me in Vancouver. Things change. But yeah, Holtby, he's been injured. That gave Ottinger a chance to come in. Ottinger's 1-0. .933 save percentage in that single appearance. Last year, he was 11-8-7 with a .911 save percentage. And again, Ottinger had some rough games last year. Ottinger has his shaky moments, but he's a young goaltender. He is the future in net in all likelihood. And so I'm surprised that he's not getting more of an opportunity with Dallas right now, with Bishop still on the shelf. And of course, if/when Bishop becomes healthy and able to play, and that's still an if/when question, because it's been so long since he played. So even if he's declared okay, how long is it going to take for him to get ready? Yeah, I who do you go with? Is it Holtby and Bishop? Does Hudobin go on waivers? It's going to be interesting to see what happens when it comes to Dallas, because there's a lot of question marks with this lineup. Now, in terms of goals for and goals against, I want to talk about this because I want to talk about it from a coaching perspective, because I'm hearing a lot of the coach has to go about Rick Bowness. I'm not going to say he doesn't, but we've been down this road. Last year, they were 18th in goals for per game. They were 9th in goals against per game. That's with Rick Bowness behind the bench. Did not make the playoffs because they couldn't win in overtime and they couldn't win in shootouts. If they'd won in overtime or in shootouts, they would have beat out Nashville for that last spot. The season before that, where you had Jim Montgomery, and then, of course, he ends up being forced to resign, and they bring in Rick Bowness. That year, they were 28th in goals scored, but they were 2nd in goals against. So they were a team that had really good defense and good goaltending, couldn't score. The season prior to that, 2018-2019, under Jim Montgomery, they were 29th in goals scored and 2nd in goals against. They did it again. 2017-2018, the year prior, under Ken Hitchcock, they were 18th in goals for and 7th in goals against. And I didn't think that was a particularly good season for them either. Hitchcock being behind the bench that year, to me, that was weird. It's one of those rare times where you look at a coach and go, well, that's transitional. He's not going to last that long behind the bench, is he? And he didn't. 2016-2017, of course, they ended up firing Lindy Ruff. I made a video at the time saying Lindy Ruff wasn't the problem. Firing Lindy Ruff didn't fix anything. They were 17th in goals for. They were 29th in goals against. Now, the year after Ruff left, they did end up back in the top 10 in goals against, but their goal scoring started to drop off. The prior to that season, 2015-2016, they were 1st in goals for, 19th in goals against, again under Lindy Ruff. That year being punctuated by the fact that, yeah, they could score. They scored like crazy because their goaltending wasn't great. Kari Lehtinen, Antti Niemi cost them a combined $9 million, and their goaltending was one of the worst tandems in the league when you looked at all the numbers. That was a year that I didn't even watch them in that series against St. Louis. They knew they were going to lose, and I was like, I'm not watching it. That was back when the channel was so small that it didn't really matter if I watched or not. Nobody really cared if I watched. Whereas if I said, well, I'm not watching that playoff game tonight, because people would rightfully start asking some questions. But I never blamed Ruff. Just like I didn't necessarily blame Hitchcock when things weren't going great. I didn't blame Montgomery. Bonus I'm having a bit of a harder time with because he is changing the lineup a lot, even after wins. The Riley Tufte debacle, the way he handled it, it's definitely a situation where in a small market, and I'm saying that Dallas is a small market not because it's a small city, but because the amount of pressure on the Dallas Stars is not what it is in an Original Six market or in a Canadian market. So in terms of the attention that Dallas gets, it's a lot less. The pressure's a lot less too, because Jim Nill should be under the gun. Jim Nill is the one that's been putting this team together since April of 2013. So while I talked about Benning in a recent Canucks video, I find it odd that Jim Nill doesn't seem to get any heat, even though Dallas has struggled throughout most of his time there. The 2020 Stanley Cup final run was great, but it was a one-off. And it was this fantastic run that was awesome to watch, but again, it was a one-off. And so, much like Montreal was last year, although with Montreal, there's also the factor that they lost a lot of players from that run. Dallas didn't. Dallas just went on an incredible run. They were helped out along the way on that run. Calgary probably should have beaten them. Absolutely probably should have beaten them. Didn't. Calgary's got some of the same psychological hurdles to overcome as Toronto does if they're going to make it to that next level. And for Dallas, they took advantage of Colorado as well. Colorado probably would have beaten them, but they end up outlasting them in 7 games. So, since Nil became the general manager, they lost in round one in 2014. No playoffs in 2015. 2016, the year they have that first place in terms of goals for per game, they lost in round two. 2017, no playoffs. 2018, no playoffs. 2019, they lost in round two. 2020, they were in the finals. And in 2021, they missed the playoffs. And right now, based on the start of the season, based on the fact that they're still one of the worst offensive teams in the league, he's never fixed the goal scoring problem. This is one of those things that just, again, pointing out from a Vancouver perspective, if they had been this low in goal scoring for the last 6 years where they haven't been in the top half of the league, there would be some serious questions being asked. And they look like they could miss the playoffs again this year. So 1, 2, 3, 4, that'd be 5 playoff misses in 9 years for Jim Nill. And I don't know that there's any thought of maybe replacing Nill, and we could talk about his drafting record and some hits and some misses he's had along the way as well, because there's definitely been some hits and misses. But yeah, I don't know. You know, I don't know what the solution is for Dallas. They need more goals. They don't get them. I don't know that the lineup as it's currently constituted will get them. I do find it odd that they don't score goals, and yet they have a very good power play. That's an oddity. It's very unusual to see that, which tells you that 5-on-5, it's not happening. On the power play, it is. So maybe there is some way to fix this. And yeah, maybe they end up going to another coach. But they had Ruff, Hitchcock, Montgomery, and now Bowness. That is 1, 2, 3, 4 coaches since the start of 2015-2016. So bringing in coach number 5, if that's your only solution, I don't know that it fixes it. Because I don't know if you can get more goals out of Jamie Benn at this point. I don't know if you're going to get more goals out of Radulov at this point, or Pavelski, because they're older players, and there's always that decline that takes place. And in Dallas, some of the young kids that you might have been counting on by now, like Riley Tufte comes up, and he was supposed to play his 3rd game last night. He's a healthy scratch, and everybody's mad about it. Tufte at 23 years of age already should have been a key guy if he'd been the right pick at that point, right? He's a first-round draft pick. So there are still concerns I have with Dallas that go well and beyond Rick Bowness. So Bowness will get the heat. He may end up being a coach that gets fired. But the other thing that's interesting is that, Brian Burke always said, a GM gets one coach. You get to fire one coach, and then they start looking at you. They've been through a number of coaches. Again, the Jim Montgomery situation was different. That was something completely different. But they've been through a number of coaches, and at no point have I ever heard anything about Jim Nill potentially having any concern about his job. And I'm not saying that firing him fixes everything. I just find it baffling that in one market, you'll see a Canadian GM under a lot of scrutiny, but because it's Dallas's GM and it's a hockey team in Dallas, I don't see the same thing with the Dallas Stars when it comes to that level of scrutiny. And I wonder how far things have to go before that happens. Jamie Alexiak not being on this team has hurt him. There should have been some way to keep a hold of Jamie Alexiak. There have been some confusing moves by the Dallas Stars that have definitely had me scratching my head. And that 2020 Stanley Cup final run may save the job of Jim Nill. Maybe one of those things that he can point to and say, look, this team's not that far off. And as I've said before, sometimes the worst thing that can happen to a team is a long run like that, because it leaves you thinking you're closer to a championship than you necessarily are in subsequent seasons. So we'll see what happens with Dallas. But I'd be interested to know what Dallas fans think, what you think. And again, if Jim Nill was running in a market, if he's running a team in a market where there's a ton of pressure all the time, would there be more discussion about him? Or would it still be, well, they need to get rid of Rick Bowness, which again could be fair, but does it fix their lack of scoring? Because what I've seen so far would tell me that lack of scoring is part of this roster, and various coaches, various systems have not been able to get goals out of it. Something's got to change. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. As always, don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.